Welcome to OLC 40. This is week 7, class 23. You are on unit 3, and we are working on assignment 38 today. I am Jillian Percy. Here are all the ways to reach me. 1-800-465-7144. That's the studio number. In the office, 1-800-667-3703. Don't leave a message, however, because I don't have access to my phone messages right now. It's still hooked up to the previous person. You can fax your work to 1-800-463-7852. You can ask me a question at jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. You can re-listen to a recording on YouTube at capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. Okay. I'm kind of starting here with some of the things that I've been noticing a little bit lately. This is just a little editing checklist as you're doing any of your work, okay? Check for spelling mistakes, punctuation mistakes, capitalization mistakes, and any kind of usage mistakes. So first, spelling. I find that most spell checking software on computers or on the web do a pretty good job with catching spelling errors. However, you need to keep in mind that they won't catch certain kinds of errors. For example, if the word is spelled correctly, but it is the wrong word, it won't work, okay? If the verb is spelled correctly, but it doesn't match the subject, it won't catch it, right? So if I said, for example, here I've got it corrected already. If I said, he run to the store, run is spelled correctly, but it's not the right verb tense to go with he. I would need to add the S to make it correct. If the verb is spelled correctly, but it doesn't match the right verb tense you wanted, like maybe you were trying to write in the future tense, but you accidentally wrote it in the present tense, or you switched back and forth. One sentence you use the present tense, another one you use the past, then you use the future. It could be all over the place, but it might be spelled correctly each time. Again, the computer will not catch that. Okay, you'll have to notice that yourself. Capitalization rules. I realize we haven't really talked about capitalization rules, but I do want to cover it a little bit because I am seeing these kind of errors in some people's works. So in general, we use lowercase letters in English when we write, except when we want to emphasize certain things. So here are some of the places that we add capital letters to: the beginning of a sentence, the word I, names of people or pets, days of the week, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, months of the year, January, February, so on. Names of places: Sioux Lookout, Poplar Hill, provinces: Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, countries like Canada, United States, Mexico, continents, right? If we say Asia or Antarctica, we capitalize those. Titles of any kind of a magazine, a newspaper, right? The Wawate would be a capital W. Books, movies, songs, any kind of video games. So here's the thing. There's two different ways to make capitalization errors. One is when you don't capitalize something that you should have. So for example, if I have the word phrase here, I went to see my friend Jack, right? Jack should be capitalized. But let's say I just happen to like big S's and I happen to like the big E's, and I do that. Well, it is all spelled correctly, but there's no reason for us to have capitalized the S. It's confusing to the reader. It makes it look like that's the beginning of a sentence, but it's not. So we would take that out. And there's absolutely no reason ever to put a capital letter in the middle of a word. I know sometimes we have a particular letter we like, or a letter we get confused on, like B's or something, where we tend to get used to like always writing the capital letter. But when we're handing things in for to be marked, we just can't do it. Okay. I think that really covers everything for capitalization. Punctuation. I don't have space to go over every single possible punctuation issue, but there are some common ones. It's weird. Something's got fixed in a previous class that I didn't realize. Okay, first of all, using quotation marks incorrectly. That is easy to do because there are so many finicky little rules about quotation marks. So if you're looking at it going, oh, I just don't know, check online, look up the rules. It's totally fine to do that. I do too, right? It's one of those things where there's a lot of really fussy stuff and you just don't know for sure. The next two things are really common and they're kind of similar things. And one is where somebody uses a comma when it should have been a period. And the other one is when they used a comma and it should have been a semicolon. And basically, in both times, the person isn't quite realizing that they've written a complete sentence. And so they're using a comma where it just doesn't make sense. So, for example, sorry, I had this all set up and then it got fixed accidentally. I went to see my friend Janet. We went to go to the movies. We went dancing. Mama, we went. Oh, okay. So this is a really, I won't do anymore. This is a really common kind of sentence I get. And I think it's happening because the person's written a very short sentence. It's still a complete sentence, but it just sounds funny to them. So they kind of just put a comma and keep on going to the next sentence. Okay. But it just doesn't work in English. You can't do it. It's called either like a run-on sentence or it can be called, if you want to get all formal, a comma splice error. But basically, it should have used a period, or you could have used a semicolon if you wanted to, but you can't just keep on going and add sentence after sentence by using a comma. Okay. So I went to see my friend Janet, comma. We went to go out to the movies, comma. We also went dancing, comma. We went, oh, hang on. God, here we go. Sorry, repeat it. There we go. Doesn't work. Okay. Now, there is more than one way I can fix this. One way is where I get to the comma, I could just go ahead and put a period instead. I went to see my friend Janet, period. That's awesome. I could do the same thing for these two. The problem is sometimes what happens is it sounds very short. So people want to change it. So I'm going to make this as a capital letter because it's the beginning of a sentence. Now, I can join this two ways. I can join it using a conjunction like and, but, then. I'm going to write then. We went to go out to the movies. Then we went dancing. Now that works because I've added this conjunction right here. Because a conjunction is a legitimate way to join two sentences. A comma by itself is not. It has to have the conjunction there. Okay. The other thing you can do if you don't want to put the conjunction there is you can use a semicolon. Now, we usually only do those if they're kind of connected in thought, like they're connected in some way that you're trying to emphasize, okay? It's not a common way of joining sentences, but it is our way. And that is legitimate as well, too. But you can't just keep using commas and join up your sentences that way, okay? You can also only do that to join two sentences. You cannot join more than two sentences together in that fashion, okay? Then it would automatically become a run-on sentence as well. This is the biggest punctuation issue I see happening, okay? So please be careful with those. Some important proofreading or editing tips. I get the impression some people aren't happy about editing, and I don't know if it's just because they're not sure what to do or if they're feeling like it's something only younger people have to do, but everybody needs to work on proofreading and editing. That includes me, that includes professional writers. That's why people who write novels have people called copy editors who literally go through and read every single word they write. So in that case, someone like Stephen King, for example, super famous writer, writes all sorts of stuff, but you're writing that level of stuff a day, absolutely, he makes errors. So somebody else gets paid to go along, check for grammar errors, check for punctuation errors. I guarantee you they find something. They don't just go, oh, he's a professional, so it's great. So don't be embarrassed or worried about having to check your work. I make errors. You guys have seen that. I absolutely have made errors, spelling mistakes, grammar errors, all sorts of things. I'm writing a lot of content. It's easy to do, right? So it's really, really important to try and remember to check for errors. And point out sometimes for me, it's because I'm teaching two different classes, and sometimes the slides are linked. And when I do stay in one class, it's changing things on the other slide, which it shouldn't do, but it's doing for some reason. Anyways, absolutely, please check for errors. If we have time, we'll come back and watch the proofreading video, but I want to kind of go on to the main assignment first, and we'll come back to that later if we have to. So we're going to be working with a graphic organizer today, but I wanted to talk about them. We kind of discussed them earlier, but I'm not sure if we used the actual word graphic organizer. I think we kind of discussed them as a type of diagram. So a graphic organizer is just a visual display that demonstrates the relationship between facts, concepts, or ideas. It specifically guides the user's thinking as they build up and fill in the graphic organizer. There are all sorts of organizers depending on the purpose of the activity. You could be used to help you summarize information, prioritize important facts, order events, make connections or predictions, or organize information for different types of writing purposes. Today, we're going to use an organizer to help us write down a task in a procedural format. It is specifically designed to help us break down the steps in chronological order, but I'm going to show you a few different types because I want to make sure that you recognize that you've seen these all the time. I guarantee you, if you've read anything on the internet at some point, you've read some of these types. This is one called a hierarchy. It can be used for family trees, but you also really see it in business where it'll be like, up here's the boss, that here's vice president of marketing, and here's the vice president of sales, and then they have the people down. It kind of shows who's in charge and then who's underneath them. So that's very commonly used in businesses. This is a type of grid, right? There's information here, here, and here. They're connected. It might show attributes or properties of items that are listed up on the top. There could be like a label up here or here, or it could be something down here. So it's one way to show information. This is an organizer you might see of a timeline of events, right? See, these little X's would be, then you filled in like 2001, I was born, 2006, I went to school, 2000 and whatever, I graduated. Historical people, somebody famous like Martin Luther King Jr., or a king, or whoever, they often get used to show when events happen and how they're related. This is an organizer that shows a process. This base here at the bottom might be showing the amount of time, or it might be showing what step came first, and then what's next, or is going to take less time, less procedures. It's just a way of showing a certain type of process. This is a type of organizer that's used to show events that happen over and over again. For example, seasons changing, life cycle of a butterfly, any sort of process that works in a cycle type of process. Sorry. Just so you know, the reason the text looks the same is this is just filler text. If I pulled this off of just the little diagrams that you can insert, I could put whatever I wanted here, right? So I could put spring, right? And then explain spring, or I could explain, the larvae of the butterfly, whatever. It's just a place for me to enter text. Okay, we often use organizers to help with the writing process because it helps us to see and remember the structure of the writing we're aiming at, right? Different types of writing have different types of underneath structure. And this is just a way to make that structure visible. Okay, so we've used this one. This is one that's called the hamburger format for writing a paragraph. And you have the topic sentence up top and the conclusion underneath. Those are the two buns that kind of hold the paragraph together. And here you have the different supporting details. They've done one on Star Wars. In the Star Wars universe, lightsabers are powerful tools. Lightsabers can cut through almost anything. Lightsabers can deflect blaster bolts. Skilled Jedi can use lightsabers to absorb force lightning. It takes a lot of practice to learn how to use a lightsaber. We have used this exact same format over and over again. After a while, you just remember the format and it's in your brain. But when you're first learning a format, I find a graphic organizer can be really helpful. Or if you're planning out something that's especially intricate, it can be really helpful as well. So I'm going to show you some examples of some writing organizers here. Hang on. Okay, so this is a persuasive writing organizer. It's the same kind of thing as an opinion organizer. So up here, you'd put your opinion or they've got claim or thesis, whatever your argument is. Give your reasons. I would also add some details here. Counterclaim. Counterclaim is when, like, if I was saying, I think we wrote an opinion on kids not going to school till they were 7. The counterclaim might be something like, however, it'd be very expensive for people to pay for childcare if children don't go to school till they're 7. You want to be aware of what the argument against your idea might be so that you can give some reasons for why that isn't as important or how it could be solved or whatever, right? So this is a way to organize your writing. It isn't what the person would finally see. Like, you would use this as kind of your rough draft, and then you would put it together in a paragraph or an essay, and that is the part people would see. This is just a way to make sure your writing has got all the structures or all the elements that it needs. Here's one more example. This is if you're doing like a whole essay. So you can see here they're doing one if they've got like 4 different paragraphs. Here's your big topic. Here's the subtopic for the different paragraphs, and then the main idea of the sentences. Now, when you're doing this kind of an organizer, it's sort of bare bones. You're not writing every single sentence or every single detail in there. You're giving kind of the big idea, and then you would flesh it out when you go ahead and do your first draft, okay? Again, this is not what the person who's reading the final product would see. It is just a way for people to start to have an outline, because most people find it hard to think of all their ideas and put everything into sentences all at the same time. So this is a way to get all the ideas down first, and then all you've got to do is try and put it into interesting sentences. Just a way to kind of split up a complicated task into smaller sections, okay? All right, here's an example of a graphic organizer for procedural text. Sometimes there's a section up top for materials needed. We're not having that in ours because the assignment has been like turn on the computer, and obviously you need the computer. But this is important if you were doing like a recipe, you would list what ingredients you needed. Or if you were doing a craft project, you might want to list what, I need this kind of glue, these kind of scissors, this kind of paper. If you were doing a repair job, you might list specifically what type of tools you need or what type of wood or whatever you need is up top, so that when the person is going to follow this, they've already got all the materials together. Now, these little squares here are where either diagrams or photographs might show up to show you what it looks like. And the reason for that is it can be really hard to explain how to do something just in words. The other thing is some people can look at a picture and find that easier to understand than just the words, especially if it was something that involves a lot of spatial relationships. Like if you were wanting to show me how to do a certain type of drawing, I would read the words, but I would definitely want to see the picture to see what I was aiming at, okay? So this is an example of one type of graphic organizer for procedural text. Okay, so procedural texts are all around us. Basically, they tell us the steps to do something. It might be something like a recipe, a craft project, how to fix a car, how to learn a certain type of social skill. Like, oh, this is the way to, impress interviewers at your job interview. How to do a certain type of math problem, right? You'll often see procedural text for example, like long division, because there's so many steps in long division. Anything you want to know how to do that requires doing things in a certain order, if somebody's explaining to you, they're going to be using the format of procedural text, okay? So here's an example of the procedural text to do a flower painting. Let me just kind of grab it. Now it's kind of spread out, but So here's a title. And again, most procedural texts would have a title. So the person knows what they're aiming for. Okay, jump to instructions. And you can see here we have materials. We need the template, the cardstock, acrylic paint. They even tell you what colors, white glue, brown felt. They also tell you what kind of equipment you're going to need. That could be included in materials, but it's fine to have it separate. Scissors, gel pen or pencil, paintbrush, Q-tips, tape. Here they've also got a video tutorial, which is great. Sometimes though, if I was doing like a painting, I would want to print off all the instructions and just have that next to me because I probably don't want my computer open while I'm painting. All right, so here you can see instructions. Step 1, find what you need. Gather your supplies and materials. There's a little picture. Step 2, cut out and trace the pot template. Print out the free flower pot template, find the link above on regular paper, and cut out one of the pots. And then they're showing you a little picture of somebody doing that. Cut a piece of cardstock in half and place one half in front of you. Then trace the flower pot template onto the bottom of the paper. So I wanted to point out, this is step 2, but you can see they actually have several sentences going on in step 2 because they're all related to this kind of big step, cutting out and tracing the pot template. They're just explaining how to do it. So it's okay for one step to have more than one sentence, okay? Step 3, paint the stems and leaves. Paint 3 to 6 thick green lines coming out from the pot to make the flower stems. Start from the center of the pot and paint one stem going straight up, then angle the outer stems towards the edge of the paper. And again, nice little picture so you can understand what they're talking about. Add simple brush strokes coming off the stems to create leaves. This will give the plant a fuller look. Wait a few minutes for the green paint to dry. Paint flower petals with Q-tips. Tape together 5 Q-tips into a bundle. You could also wrap an elastic around them. And they show you that. Add 3 shades of purple paint to a plate, close enough so that the different colors are touching. Then dip the Q-tip bundle into the center of the paint. And here you can see they've done it. Stamp the paint-covered Q-tips onto the top of the green stems until you run out of paint. And so they've got the kind of triple loaded, or I guess, I'm not sure what Sankon would be, quintupt loaded the Q-tips into these different ones so that you have purple flowers, but you have a lighter shade, a darker shade, just like in real life, if you saw plants, would have that kind of pretty. Repeat dipping the Q-tips in paint and dabbing them. Oh, and my computers went dead. Oh, awesome. That was a bad moment there. Repeat dipping the Q-tips in paint and dabbing them onto the green stems again and again. Be sure to stamp the Q-tips at different angles, rotate the bundle, and use different amounts of pressure to get unique looking blooms. Okay, so try to tell you it will look all the same if you keep them in the exact same position. If you want them to look different, change it around a little bit. Continue until you're happy with your flowers. These look like little hyacinths here. You could also use a single Q-tip dipped in one color of paint to add even more definition. So after they've finished, they've gone back through and they're adding a little bit of paint. 5, add a felt flower pot. Cut out the flower pot. Kind of racing ahead here a little bit. Glue the flower pot shape. Your flower pot painting is complete. Okay, so that's an example of a real life procedural text. You've probably, if you've ever looked up at any point in time on YouTube how to do something, that was procedural text. Okay, so that's what we're kind of trying to write basically. Procedural texts are often written in an imperative or what's called a command format of a sentence. In the imperative format, we usually use the verb first in the sentence. Picture yourself like you're a king and you're commanding your servant to do something. It's going to sound very bossy, right? Clean your room, pick up the hammer, dip your paintbrush in the water, measure the wood carefully. So those are all the verbs. They're telling you what action. The action is coming first. Now, we've been talking about how you always have a subject. And here I am, and I'm telling you to throw out the subject. In this particular type of sentence format, the subject is implied. We don't actually write it. Essentially, the subject is always you, whether it's plural or singular. So it's like they're saying, you clean your room, you pick up your hammer, you dip your paintbrush in the water. So again, it sounds really repetitive. After a while, people kind of just know that it's there. So it ends up not getting written. Okay. Technically, it's implied, but yes, it's one of the formats where we don't really use the subject. Okay. However, sometimes instead of putting the verb first, we will put a word first that indicates the sequence or the order right before the verb. It can be words like first, next, then, after that, or finally. It could also be the ordinal words like first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. It's more common to do it this way if you've got a lot of steps, like if you're doing some sort of elaborate woodwork project and it's got 27 steps, you might actually see numbers then at that point rather than just the words. But this is more common when you're seeing a lot of steps and they have to be done in a very specific way. This is kind of more general. Okay. So this is assignment 38, and it's using an organizer for an information paragraph. So yes, this is information, but it's specifically a type of writing called procedural writing, okay? We just walked through how to create a resume with a template on paper. A resume can also be created on a computer, which we talked about. For this assignment, you want to describe the basics of how to turn on a computer and open Microsoft Office Word. Your purpose for writing this information paragraph is to inform. Your audience is an adult who has never turned on a computer. How would this person even get started? Now, I know some of you might be thinking, hey, what adult has never turned on a computer? Well, my mom is 85 and she could care less about computers. She has never used one. If she was going to do anything, would pull out her typewriter and she would type it that way. So if I wanted to explain to her how to use Microsoft Word, I would have to be super specific to get the idea across. Okay, so think of somebody like that who's just never ever had a chance to use a computer. They don't know anything about computers at all. This is a little organizer that we're going to use to kind of format our writing. When it's completed, it's going to serve as the rough copy. Okay. Normally, we would just do our own rough copy, but because we talked about how this is going to kind of structure our thinking, we're going to use this as a rough copy. It should have at least 5 or 6 sentences. The title is How to Turn on a Computer and Use Microsoft Word, and the topic sentence. Now, here they're being very specific. You have to start your sentence this way. This is how you, and then you need to finish that sentence. And then here are the steps. First, you need to explain what to do. Second, explain what to do. Next, explain what to do. Then explain what to do. Now, you can use more sentences if needed, right? You can keep on saying next and after that, and then as many steps as you need to put there, go ahead and keep putting there, right? Closing sentence, this is how you. And it's going to be essentially a rephrasing of the first topic sentence, okay? So first you do the rough copy and then you're going to do the good copy, but I want to talk about the rough copy a little bit more. Okay, so some quick notes. It's talking about, oh, why is my computer doing this? I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on. There's no storm here or anything. I'm not even touching the computer. Okay, it's talking about teaching somebody how to use Microsoft Word, but I don't really know if everybody out there has Microsoft Word Or if you do have it on the computer, whether you've ever used it to do assignments. Not everybody uses Microsoft Word. And if you're not familiar with it yourself, then obviously it's going to be pretty hard to teach someone else how to use it. So if you have not used Microsoft Word, or you don't have it on your computer, that's fine. Some alternative word processing software is Google Docs, which everybody has. If you're a student at WASA, you have Google Gmail, and then you have access to Google Docs. Macs have the program called Pages. There's also a program called WordPerfect, which apparently is still out there. Any of those is fine to use for the purposes of the assignment. They all really work in very similar ways. It's just kind of sometimes the look of things or what order they're in. Sometimes one company will call something the format and someone else call it the arrangement or something like that. It's just very small, finicky differences. Okay, that's fine. For the purposes of this exercise, we're just going to assume that the imaginary person you're writing to has the exact same type of system that you do. Okay, doesn't really change the content. Hang on a sec. Okay, so this is procedural writing, and a huge part of procedural writing is making sure to get the order correct. So you have to start at the very, very basics first. You have to get them to turn on that computer. That sounds really easy, but for someone like, say, my mom, my poor mom, she won't hear this though. If she was looking at a computer right now, she would have no idea where the button is to turn it on, right? She's used to really big buttons in the old days, or a remote control that has also fairly big buttons that are labeled. The thing where computers have tiny little buttons and there's no label, so you have no clue what they are, she would have no idea. So if I was going to write her a little message about how to use or turn on a computer, I would have to be really, really, really specific. Okay. So I'm going to be looking at how clearly you give directions. You're going to need to break it down into really small steps so your audience doesn't get confused. Remember, I'm your overall audience for all these assignments, but your audience for the purpose of the assignment is really a person who's never seen a computer and has no idea how to use one. So make sure you're using directional words. You're going to want to make sure you're using words like top, bottom, right, left. Don't forget to tell them what tool they are using, right? Someone like my mom, who's never used a computer, she's used a keyboard. She's never used a mouse. If you were expecting her to automatically know to use a mouse, she wouldn't. You would have to tell her, right? So we're picturing someone who's just got no experience whatsoever. I know it's really hard to imagine if you're younger, but just picture, I'm sure some of you guys must have older people in your life who are like my mom and haven't used those kind of things. Okay, so I'm breaking it down even further for here. You're going to be very specific about where to find the button. What side is it on? Is there any way they can tell if it worked? How long will it take for them to see something on the screen? Do they need a password or a username to make the computer work? How are they going to find the word program? Sometimes the very best way to do an assignment like this is turn off your computer and then for yourself, do each step and write it down as you go. So you would look for the button, write down how to do that. Turn the button on, write down how to do that. And then, okay, what have I got to do next? So if you're doing it that way, it's a little bit easier to make sure you don't skip a step. Make sure the steps are in the right order. You wouldn't tell somebody how to format a page before you told them how to turn on the computer, obviously, right? Just like I wouldn't tell somebody to pour a cake into the pan before they'd even put any flour in the bowl or done anything with the cake mix, right? But sometimes it can be less obvious that we've told something out of order or that we've skipped something, especially if it's something that we know how to do very quickly ourselves. So for example, if you've ever tried to explain how to cook something to a young person who's never cooked before, like how to make a cake. And I tell them, oh, well, now you pour the batter in the pan. And I forget, oh, wait, you've got to grease the pan first. Well, I've forgotten because I know it. Like I know it so automatically, I don't even think about it. Right. But because I'm telling somebody new or young who's never done it, they don't know it. So the best way to check for this is, again, turn off the computer, look at what you've written, and only follow your own writing. Look at exactly what step you did, step by step by step, and see if you can get it to work only following what you've written. Did it work? If it didn't, what happened? Did you forget a step? Did you put something out of order? Actually trying to follow your own writing is really the very best way to check that your order is, that the order of your instructions is correct. Okay. That's the rough copy. Good copy. For the good copy, you're not going to have the organizer. So I wouldn't see all the lines. I wouldn't see the little black words written by the typewriter and then your words. You're just going to blend it all together into one paragraph. Okay. You're going to have to make sure that you include the words written in the organizer. So for example, where it says first, if I was to say first, find the red button, I can't just write find the red button and assume that I'll remember this. I have to actually write the word first. Okay. It's especially important for this part about here. This is how you, and this is how you. You also have to make sure you've included the title in your good copy. I know that we all know it's there, but it's part of good formatting. You have to include it. Make sure your steps are written in command format. In other words, the verb is first. Now, again, you can use the time words, but the verb, there's no subject, okay? No subject. Be sure the steps are clear and easy to understand. Remember too that we talked about how you might need more than one sentence per step, right? If it's something that's really complicated to do, you might need to take a couple of sentences to explain how to do it. And that's fine. That would still all count as one step if you're trying to explain something. And this goes back to what I was talking about. Make sure the final product is an actual paragraph, not simply a list. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example. Here we go. Sample paragraph. Okay. So I'm going to pretend that I'm teaching somebody how to drive a car who has never driven a car before. So first, I've got to give them this a title: How to Drive a Car. Okay. So this is how to begin driving a car. Okay. This is my rough copy. Okay. First, make sure you have the car keys. Oops. Then unlock the doors and get in the car. Now, I could have made that two separate sentences, but instead I kind of joined it into one long compound sentence. Now, I want to point this out. Normally in a sentence, I would have the subject here. So for right now, I'm going to put the word you here. Then you unlock the doors and you get in the car. Okay. Normally, I would make sure to put a noun or a pronoun there before I have the verb. For the purposes of this kind of writing, we don't need the you. Okay. It's just assumed and we don't have to have it there. So this is a totally legitimate sentence. Okay. So I've got them in the car. What do they need to do first? Well, before they do anything else, they've got to put their seatbelt on. Okay. So next, put your seat belt. Oh, how do I say put your seatbelt on? Pull the seat belt across your chest and hips and fasten it into the buckle on the left hand side of the seat. Now, I want to point this out. I was going to just say, put your seat belt on. Here's the thing. If it was a person that had really never driven before, never been in a car, never done anything, there is no way that would make any sense to them. So I got very specific here, okay? Pull the seatbelt across your chest and hips, fasten it into the buckle on the left-hand side of your seat. Okay, so I got very specific. All right, if you were driving a car, what would I do next? Think. I would probably look behind me to make sure nobody's behind me. I'm picturing myself in my own driveway, and before I back up, I would just want to make sure no one is around me. After that, check behind you for small children, pets, or obstacles, like bikes that could get run over. Make sure they are out of the way before you continue. Okay, so I want to point out again, I'm still starting with the verb here. Even though I'm starting a new sentence, I'm still doing that verb first command format, okay? Now, no, I can't say now because now would imply I'm doing it right now. Then put your keys in the ignition slot, which is located to the right of the steering wheel. Okay, so if I want to do this, I'm going to turn the key, and usually I have to give it a little bit of gas. Turn the key to the right, and at the same time, step on the gas pedal. Ooh, gently. Okay. So I'm going to pause right there. What do you see as the problem in that sentence? Because there is definitely a problem. I'm going to read it back over, and you guys think for a second about what's wrong with this. Then put your keys in the ignition slot, which is located to the right of the steering wheel. Turn the key to the right, that's fine. And at the same time, step on the gas pedal gently. Okay, so what's the problem? There's two pedals. If you're driving an automatic, there's three pedals, right? There's your gas, there's your brake, and there's your clutch. How do they know which pedal to step on? I've got to be more specific. It's tricky though, because then the sentence starts to get really long. So I'm gonna shorten this one. I had a compound sentence here. I'm gonna turn this one to a really tiny little sentence. Turn the key to the right, and then turn this into the beginning of a new sentence. At the same time, step on the gas pedal gently, which is the pedal on the far, which side is it? Is it on my left or my right? Far right. Okay. Again, that's crucial information. So this is why I was talking about having to be very specific about where to find things. Okay, so now they've got their car turned on. So you, if you hear the engine start up, then you have done this correctly. I was trying to think how to phrase this as a command, but I don't think I can. It's basically like a monitoring step, right? This is how you know you've done it correctly. If it didn't turn on, wait 5 minutes and try it again. Why am I telling them to wait 5 minutes? Because we don't want them to flood the engine, right? Okay, so hopefully they've got the car on. Once the car is on. What are they going to do? Put the gear shift into reverse so you can reverse out of the driveway. Okay. I want you to walk through your mind and picture doing that. There's a huge problem here. What have I forgot to tell them? So picture your 6-year-old sister and she's doing this. She's just turned the car on and she's put the car in reverse. What are you really hoping that person has done before they go any further? They have to have put the brake. They got to have their foot on the brake before they start moving the gear shift around, right? I don't actually think most cars these days would even let you let you shift the gear without the brake on. But just in case there was a problem, you'd want to make sure. Once the car is on, move your foot from the brake, from the gas pedal to the brake pedal, which is just to the left. Okay. So look at all these words. This person hasn't even driven. Look how long it's taken me just to get this person into the car, in their seatbelt. They've turned the car on. They haven't even moved yet. Right. So with this kind of writing, especially if you're assuming somebody is a complete beginner, you do have to be incredibly detailed. Obviously, I would write this very differently to somebody who just needs to know like the procedures for stepping into a new car, but they've had all sorts of experience driving, or they're used to driving an automatic, but they need to drive a manual, right? I wouldn't be quite as specific because I would assume they know some more. But for the purposes of our assignment, we're not assuming that they know anything. So once the car is on, move your foot from the gas pedal. Oh, I've got the wrong kind of brake here. Hang on a second. From the brake pedal, which is just to the left of it. Then, oops, then keep your foot on the brake and put the gear shift into reverse so you can reverse out of the driveway. So you can, yeah, that works. It's a bit wordy, but can't be helped. And then next, I would have to tell them how to carefully back up and do all that driving. So I did this just to kind of show you. First of all, I've got all these sequence words. With procedural writing, you really do need them. Sometimes you'll see an actual number instead, especially if you're on the internet, because visually that's easier, but we're not using numbers for this one. We're having to use the words. But then right after the ordinal word or the sequence word, we're going to be having highlighting. We're going to, sorry, not highlighting. We're going to have those verbs. I'm highlighting the verbs. You can see them. You can see it's the very next word. We're skipping the subject and we're putting the verb next. And even if you write a compound sentence, see like here, next, pull the seatbelt across your chest and hips and fasten it. Fasten it is the beginning of your next sentence. And I still have not included my subject. Here, same thing here. I've started a new sentence. I still am just using the command form of the verb without a subject. So it's a very different kind of writing. And for some people, it almost sounds rude because we're not using words like please or would you mind or if you wanted to, which we would often do if we were saying this to somebody, right? If I was actually walking my mom through how to do something like this, I would be like, okay, mom, well, here's what we want to do. Could you please do this? Mom, could you? And I would be very super polite to kind of try and negate how bossy it sounds. But for this kind of writing, it's fine. Don't worry about sounding bossy. It's totally fine. So first, do the rough copy, then write it over again without all the lines, without the organizer, just as a paragraph, okay? Then you're going to hand that in to me, and then we will work on the next assignment tomorrow. Maybe if we have time, we'll get to the next unit, but I'm not positive. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Give me a phone call in the morning if you have any problems. I'd be happy to talk to you, or you can also email me a message and I will get back to you then as well. If you do that, make sure to leave me a current phone number, especially if your phone number might have changed from what we have on file. Okay, thank you so much for coming out, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.